So we're back with a bang into UK retail and a massive big job. Thinking about this business, My Local, why do you believe you can make it succeed when Morrison's obviously decided to sell it?
So, a couple of reasons. Morrison's did some great stuff. They bought great stores. They fitted them out to a fantastic level. They gave great training. But just because they're a supermarket doesn't mean they can run C-stores. And they didn't bring in C-store people in the way that some of their competitors did. So, it's a bit like me saying, a Michelin chef like Michel Roux runs Le Gavroche, an outstanding world-class restaurant. Could he run a McDonald's? Probably not. A great McDonald's manager that puts thousands of people through the business a week, could he run Le Gavroche? Probably not. The fact they're both restaurateurs doesn't mean they can easily weave into each other's business. The fact that a supermarket is great as a supermarket doesn't mean they can run a C-store. And so Morrison's approached it like a supermarket. They laid the stores out back to front. So they put stuff that's for top-up and later at the front of the store. They hid away a lot of the food to go and for now product. So in some cases, we just need to reverse these stores. They said, Dalton Phillips, and it was a great intent, said, I'm going to have the biggest fresh in convenience. Well, actually, if you've got more space than your sales can support, you're ending up spreading it out. And even though you've got a lot of fresh, it doesn't look impactful. To me, I'd rather have slightly less space and abundant displays. But by overspacing on fresh, what he also then did was he underspaced on beers, wines and spirits, crisps and snacks, soft drinks, food to go, and some of the sort of more impulsy convenience categories. By right-sizing our space allocations, I can bring the performance in those back, but by squeezing the space on fresh a little bit and getting abundant displays. So when I would ask shoppers, tell me the best food to go retailer, tell me the best fresh retailer. If you said to them about fruit and veg, for instance, they'd say market stalls. And I'd say, well, why are they the best? It's, the way that they abundantly display and there's loads of product, it's piled high, looks fantastic. So for me, abundance versus scarcity sells. So I want abundance in fresh, but I want it to only have the space it needs to keep it looking abundant. I want to then do the other categories that are important in convenience really well. And so Morrison's made some of those mistakes. They also had an intention to get to 1,000 stores really quickly. They got to 153. But they built a distribution system that needed 1,000 stores. Their cost of distribution was 12.5%. We can do the same for about 1%. And so we can save tens of millions of pounds on what they were spending on the day we took over, and we did by finding a partner like Nicer, who are a specialist convenience wholesaler that have, for decades have been doing multi-drop, small format drops to independent retailers. And on day one we made that transition, which saved tens of millions of pounds. Similarly, Morrison's had literally well over 100 people in head office and distribution. We need 42, and that's not scrimping. That's the right size for a business our size, and will grow as the business grows. So by right sizing, by distribution, by changing the space allocation in the stores, by changing the layout of the stores, we made a massive day one transformation in our profitability. We also then, by calling ourselves My Local, I want staff to say it's my local, not your local. At My Local we do this. I want them to feel that ownership that the word my suggests, but the localness that the word local suggests. So My Local is about ownership, it's about catchment, it's about community. Now, if you're going to say that, you've got to live to it. So things like, we won't ever waste a product. Morrison's were throwing away tens and hundreds of thousands of product every year in this business. We are going to give all of our food that's past its sell-by date to charity, and every store has chosen that homeless charity or church or food bank. Every store also has adopted its own charity within 1 mile. Why 1 mile? Because I know 80% of shoppers come from within 1 mile. 60% come from within just a quarter of a mile. So My Local is much more than a name. It's about ownership of our teams. It's about customers saying, this is My Local. I'm popping down My Local for some bread, some milk, or coffee. And for us to be part of that community in every single sense, whether it's local product, local charity, local people, local staff, bringing that all together into what is our local, My Local business.
Let's just take a step back and look at the UK industry and the market that you're trading in. It's very competitive, isn't it? I mean,
it is.
Who are the winners? Who do you look at as some of the winners in the market that you're competing against, and who are operating in the market successfully at the moment?
So I'd look at people. A lot of the regionals and more localised retailers, I think, are doing a better job, because generally they tend to individualise their stores to those catchments. So it's back to that local thing. So people like Sewell's, people like Scott Fresh, people like Simply Fresh, who are really looking at great fresh, great offer, but relevant, resonant to the catchment that they're in, rather than we've got 100 stores, we've got to have a national approach. In forecourts, I would look at people like Euro garages, people like Greene, who are really recognising that it's not a kind of desperate, oh, I'll take that because I need a hot drink or a cold drink, or it's really doing the fresh, doing it well. If they're going to do beers, wines and spirits, they've got full chilled rooms, so it's ready for consumption within 2 hours when that person gets home, on the way home from work. They get home, they have a nice glass of wine or something. Just really taking retail to the next level. There's some great examples.
And what about you're very internationally travelled and looking at best practice globally, Mike? I mean, who are some of the winners in our industry who you'd take inspiration from internationally?
Yeah, so if I look at someone like 7-Eleven, they're awesome at being able to make really small units work and prioritising, if it's small, what are we really going to get in it? Can we change that by day part? Can we change our product on a regular basis? If I went across to America, it's Wawa, Sheetz, Quick Trip, some of those awesome operators where the families are still involved, and it's very much a personal journey for them. It's not just we're going to list, we're going to be this huge company. It's all commercial. Of course they're commercially minded, but they're really actively involved personally. And then there are people perhaps not in the convenience sector. So I was in Belgium last week and looked at Rob's Fine Foods, just retailing at its best, chocolate you can carve layers off of, and saying, how can we be the absolute best? Now that might not transpire to a C-store, but looking at that passion, looking at how can we find passion points and passionate delivery of any category that we have in our stores and still learn. So I personally do, and I increasingly take the managers out in my office, which is my mobile van, and we'll say, okay, who are your competitors? What are they doing differently, better, best? Have you thought about these guys? They're a competitor too. It might only be in one category, but what are they doing differently, better, best that we can emulate, and what can we learn? Or what aren't they doing that we could do in this catchment that's a need?
Price and pricing, obviously discounters are now into double digits in the UK. How do you perceive the discounter threat, as it's called? I mean, is that a good way to describe it even? I mean, what do you think?
Well, they've been in the UK 20 years now. They've only got to 10% market share. Do I underestimate the power that they have? Absolutely not. They're growing and they're becoming relevant to shoppers. And actually, it's not just about money and value. They're getting some great quality offers in there now. But what I think any new competitor, whether we look at discounter here or we look at online there, all squeezing traditional grocery, actually they're really good for convenience. I can't go to a discounter very easily, even though they are doing some bread and milk and newspapers. I can't really whip in and whip out quickly. The car parks are big and cumbersome and full. The tills and the flow around the store isn't easy. So the more people use discounters, actually, they tend to do top up more and daily needs more in a C-store. If people use online, I can't online shop for the fact we've run out of nappies and we've got a screaming kid. I can't online shop for the fact I fancy a glass of wine now. I can't online shop for some treats or impulse products. So the more people do online, the more people do discounter, actually it's complementary and grows convenience. It's the supermarkets who will struggle more with the pressure of those two formats.
And looking at obviously the store numbers that you've got, and I mean you've been around the stores. You're on your second tour of the stores, aren't they? Where are the store numbers now, and what are the projections going forward?
So we bought 140 off Morrison's. I mean, every network in any retailer has got the good, the bad, and the ugly. Morrison's, before we did the deal, closed the 23 ugly stores, if you like. So we didn't take on the worst stores, they closed them. In fact, 10 of what they call ugly can work with our model and be very good stores. So we, out of the 153 of which they shut 23, we took 10 of them back, so we bought 140, 130 are trading currently. We're getting to a steady state, getting them reopened, getting them rebranded, refilled, and then reformatted. And then after 12 weeks, we then open the other 10 stores one at a time.
So looking, I mean, you've got the drive still there, Mike. I mean, look at 20 years from now. I mean, where do you want to take this business? I mean, how ambitious are you? It's a silly question to ask of Mike Greene, perhaps.
Well, it's great that you say 20 years, because a lot of people think 2 to 5 years or 3 years. Of course, we have a 3-year strategy, but one of the things I asked all of my board that I recruited to commit to was a minimum 7 years. One of the things that I learned, and retired at 46, far too young, is actually I want to do business. I'm involved in business. So kind of me now, retirement feels like stopping doing something you don't want to do. well, actually, if I love doing it, if I'm doing it, why would that be work? And it doesn't feel like work. I get really excited about coming out to stores and spending time in the stores. And I visited every store before we bought the business because I wanted to meet the managers. I wanted to look in their eyes and see what they liked, what they disliked. I wanted to speak to our colleagues, whether they were sales assistant, a team leader, assistant manager. And I wanted to tell them that when we took over, that we would say every manager will have come from our assistant manager pool, will have come from our team leader pool, would have joined as a sales assistant. So homegrown talent. I wanted them to believe that this was going to be so much different to the corporate structure, the corporate approach that they'd been used to. Again, it's more local. It's the way I'd run a team if I owned a single business. The fact that we own 140 is secondary to that. And, everyone says, how many stores are you going to have? If in a year's time we had 140 fantastically profitable, growing stores with happy teams, I'm not going to be unhappy. By the same token, we've already been approached by many people who want to sell. We're looking at those stores. We're not going to buy a store just to get a number that's going to be an anchor or a cancer to us, but the right stores at the right price we will buy. And we've got funding to do that. We've got a team that are more than capable of that. My ops director has been running 260 stores for the last 7 years. My trading director has been supplying and was CEO of a business supplying 2,000 stores. So scale isn't a problem for us. If the right stores, right networks, right opportunities come along, we'll buy it. International can be an opportunity. And also sub-format. I look at Greg's, I look at a Starbucks, a Costa. Well, there's no reason why we couldn't have my local off license, my local coffee shop, my local sandwich shop, and have smaller units that are more specialised if the location's right. Not in the next year or two, but as we look 20 years out, all of those things are possible, and many of them are probable.
Just talking about suppliers, obviously branded suppliers play a key role in this business, and thinking back at the days of Jackson's and Bell's, suppliers really supported those businesses, didn't they? And really, believed in them. What kind of reaction are you getting from suppliers?
So you mentioned some of those, just in the same way as Wawa Sheets, Quick Trip. In the UK, it was like David Sands, it was Bell's, it was Jackson's, it was Sewell's. It was these chains that were great inspiration to me. And they did have different relationships with suppliers. Why? Because they didn't just say, give me the best product and rape a supplier for the best margin. They also said, you give me the best deal, I'll guarantee you this will happen in every one of our stores. They'll have the whole range, they'll have every promotion, they'll have it on the day we say they do. The point of sale will be up. And they could deliver the execution that suppliers wanted. Suppliers are more than happy to support businesses that deliver their end of the promise. Too many retailers are just out to screw them for the lowest possible margin and don't live up to their end of the deal.
So what are your thoughts for the industry? I mean, can we talk about it as an industry? I mean, it's quite a small world, isn't it, in terms of retailers knowing what other retailers are doing in different markets and visiting and trying to learn from each other internationally. I mean, do you think that's an important part of what we do, Mike?
It's huge. I mean, for me, if you were a footballer, you'd look at who's the best footballer in the world, who plays best in my position. How can I copy what they're doing? So any retailer that sits in their own world or their own store and doesn't get out there is only going to ever be as good as their own view of the world. So last week I was out with 32 of the UK's leading retailers with ACS in Brussels, looking at C-stores in Brussels, but also talking together about what are you doing that's interesting, different, best. Who do you think's interesting, different, best? And similarly with NACS and with some of the international stores out there, I'm always wanting to learn, and so I want me and my team to get out there and see what can we emulate, what's going on, how can we evolve. Because John Irish, who we talked about earlier, I remember 30 years ago, I was there as a kind of ambitious, young, energised, but really inexperienced manager who had joined his team, and he said, you know what? Our business convenience, our sector convenience is like dancing with elephants. You're either quick or you're dead. And that was like, oh yeah, so right, we've got to move, we've got to change, we've got to evolve. But he could say that today and it'd still be the same. Our business, our sector is like dancing with elephants. You're either quick or you're dead. You move and you change or you die. And so we'll always evolve.
John Irish was the guy who inspired you in retail. How would you inspire a young person coming into the industry, as a teenager or early 20s and thinking, is this a career I should consider? And what do I do to be as successful as someone like Mike Greene?
It's a good question, and thank you for suggesting I was successful. For me, I'm always trying to think, what can I do next? Where do we evolve from here? When I first did the kind of separation of charity, business, personal, what I realised is the more I did all of them, the more they were overlapped. Where charity and business come together is often called community. It's a sweet spot where you can bring them together, they make a difference. And what is it about that that's common? It's people. Business is always about people. As I've looked around the world and seen great businesses, it's because they've had great people policies. Companies like Container Store in America with Kip Tindall and so on, it's always about people. So for me, before we even started, as I said, we wanted to tell them, we're going to have homegrown talent. You can join us, and if you've got qualifications, great. But you know what, if you're hardworking, you listen, you learn, you can come to us with no qualifications, and you can join as a sales assistant, become a team leader, become an assistant manager, become a manager, an ops manager, and eventually join our board. So we're going to home grow that talent. Retail, and there's great examples, whether it's Dave Potts at Morrison's, Terry Lee from Tesco's, even my own background to some degree, although I aspire to be at their level, you can start with nothing but a bit of desire, ambition, and hard work. And in retail, you can build a serious career that can give you great benefits and returns.
Well, we really appreciate you spending time with us today, Mike, and we're going to watch with interest and excitement. So thank you very much.
Thanks very much.